Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar on AI-powered intelligent document processing in collaboration with Base 64. To quickly introduce myself, my name's Beth. I'm a conference producer and editor here at SSON, and I will be moderating the session today. And for those of you joining us for the first time, or perhaps you just want a quick reminder, I'm going to run you through how you can control the console you see in front of you. To start, you can maximize your view of the media player or the slides if you need to see anything closer or a little bit clearer. There's also an attendee chat on the left hand of your screen where you can pose questions to our speakers, and we do always encourage that you do so, as we have time reserved at the end of the session today for an audience Q&A. Next, there's also a lovely emoji tab at the bottom of your screen, because it's not easy presenting online, especially when you can't see the audience. So you can send our speakers a smiley face or a thumbs up if you're enjoying the session or agree with one of their points. There's also a question mark where you can see answers to common FAQs. But if you have any other technical issues, please feel free to message in the attendee chat, and either myself or my colleagues will do our very best to help you out. Next, there's the Head and Shoulders icon where you can learn more about our speakers today and connect with them on LinkedIn if you wish. And finally, as always, we have our resources centre on the bottom right of your screens with some great additional resources from our speakers, the sponsors and the SSO network. So to quickly run you through today's resources, we have a copy of the presentation slides for you all, the IDP provider framework, the Base 64's quick start guide, Base 64's customer case studies, and finally a link so you can sign up for a free trial if you wish. Now, to introduce our speakers today, starting with Kyle, who is the VC Partnerships at Google and was one of the first 5 hires to build the new venture capital and private equity partnerships organization for Google Cloud. In his role, Kyle owns the end-to-end engagement strategy and creation of program management for 15 VC firms and their portfolio companies. Next, we have Chris, who is the CEO of Base 64, an AI company revolutionizing document intelligence. Before joining Base 64, Chris was Chief Strategy and Growth Officer at Tungsten Automation, formerly Kofax. So with that being said, that's enough from me, and I will hand over to Chris and Kyle. Thanks, guys.
All right, thanks, Beth. And you were getting a lot of thumbs up, so you obviously crushed it. Let's see if I can, keep that going. All right, welcome everyone. Today's topic, AI-powered intelligent document processing, IDP. It's receiving a lot of attention. I believe it's due to the rapid advancements in AI, so we're really going to focus on that. And as you know, data is what fuels and makes AI possible. And since IDP is a great solution for ingesting data, AI and IDP are naturally complementary. As Beth said, we've got a special guest today, Kyle from Google, who has been a solid partner to Base 64. Kyle's going to bring a perspective on AI trends that are driving sort of the market forward. Kyle and I were very deliberate in building today's agenda for you. We built it with the intention of you being able to step away with a strategic view on AI-powered IDP, insights into emerging AI trends, and practical ways, very important, practical ways to leverage the combined strengths of Base 64 and Google to really unlock that value for your business. So I'll do a quick
here with you, Chris.
Okay, let's be honest about this, Kyle. For those that don't know, Kyle is a huge Dallas Cowboys fan. I am a huge Detroit Lions fan, and anybody who follows the NFL knows that Kyle is still wiping away tears based on a 47-9 score. But you're happy to be here?
I'm happy to be here, yes, even with the gargantuan loss that we faced over the weekend. Excited to be here with you talking about Google and Base 64, even with that catastrophic loss.
All right, so I'm going to open. This is Kyle and myself and how we sort of like do the banter back and forth, so, buckle in. So I'm going to open with the macro view on AI-powered IDP. Kyle is going to provide, again, a view on AI trends and investments that's driving the market evolution. Then we're going to share the Base 64 and Google 1 + 1 = 3 and share how you can sort of get that same experience. And then we'll wrap, as Beth said, by opening the lines, answering any questions. So please submit the questions into the chat as we move throughout the session. Those questions can also include, like, how were the Cowboys honestly that bad? Okay, everybody gets it. The amount of new data being generated is growing parabolically. This data explosion presents a significant challenge. And what the data says is that 90% of all data is unstructured. And 40% of tech budgets, so your budgets, you're likely spending 40% of it to try to manage the unstructured data. Fragmented systems are also driving security risks. I don't need to tell you that. And it's doubling the cost of data breaches. Yet, despite the urgency, only 3% of companies consider themselves innovation ready, although 83% recognize it as a top priority. These trends really start to underline the critical need for solutions that Kyle and I are going to share today, and that you're likely already running, at least in proof of concept mode. So how is the industry writ large really thinking about this? So it looks like Fortune 500 companies are addressing it head on. In the last 2 years, we have seen a major shift in the business landscape. 45% of Fortune 500 companies are now mentioning AI investments and projects during their earnings calls. This clearly signals the growing importance of AI in corporate strategy and on operations. And if you think about the sharp increase in AI mentions, particularly following the unveiling of OpenAI's ChatGPT, this really illustrates how AI has transcended from ChatGPT, which was originally and is a B2C technology, to becoming a critical B2B enterprise solution. But we all know 2 data points do not make a trend, but we're up to 8 quarters. We're 8 quarters into this. So I think we can confirm that AI in business is here to stay, and we're starting to see early investments pay dividends, but most are still in early proof of concept. So what we're going to focus on as we move throughout today is really how do we get to realized scaled value? And again, AI needs high volumes of quality and trusted data. So very, very fit for the conversation around intelligent document processing. And so the AI push now is really serving as the catalyst for analyst groups to project that IDP will grow at a 30% plus CAGR, compounded annual growth rate, to a market size of 66.7 billion by 32. And as many of you know, IDP has evolved significantly over the years. It's transformed from simple data capture and digitization into what we see today, which is a more sophisticated AI-powered ecosystem that can manage even greater volumes and higher complex data sets. Initially, that wasn't the case. IDP was really focused on basic document capture, digitizing paper records to make them more accessible, more searchable. Then we had robotic process automation, RPA, that really emerged, and it really focused on automating those repetitive rules-based tasks that involved standardized structured documents. Again, that's maybe 10, 20% of an enterprise's data. So the starting point for RPA and all it could really handle was 10 to 20% of an enterprise's data, which is why many enterprises struggle to scale their RPA projects. So the next step to try to help RPA scale was intelligent automation, which really brought together a collection of automation technologies. Think intelligent document processing, robotic process, or intelligent document processing, along with RPA, along with workflow. And this was really to enhance the ability to extract structured and semi-structured data. It also incorporated things like dynamic case management, workflow, and that was really intended to do more than just automate a process or a step within the process, but to try to automate more complex workloads. And now we have finally entered the era of AI-powered IDP, where agentic process automation, AI agents, not only extract, classify, and validate data, but they also enrich and reason the data. And there's a lot to that, and we're going to unpack that shortly. And this all sounds great, but the question, if you haven't already asked yourself and your teams, you probably will, but the question then becomes, will AI-powered IDP, provide real value, or is it sort of just like the next set of buzzwords? And unfortunately, you're gonna have to deal with this for the next minute or two, but this is where I have a tendency to really geek out. Anyone that knows me knows that 1, I love the Detroit Lions. 2, I love business and I love history. Combine the 2 and you get charts like this. This chart essentially follows the money. which is usually a good way to understand why something occurred and whether it is likely to occur again. And one of the most recent investment cycles that I personally use as a blueprint for how I hypothesize the AI value creation process may take shape is the mobile internet. This slide gets to and starts to show the mobile internet value creation journey, and it highlights the relative stock performance, 1, 2, 3, relative stock performance of the different mobile tech sectors. You can see semiconductor companies like Qualcomm and ARM initially led the wave. They drove significant value creation, but they were the foundational enablers of mobile technology. And as the market matured, what you'll see is that infrastructure and device manufacturers like Samsung, Apple became dominant players, really capitalizing on their role in producing the mobile hardware to exploit the technology. And eventually the value shifted. It shifted towards software and services companies like Google, which leveraged the mobile internet ecosystem to offer their innovative services and applications. I believe that this progression demonstrates the typical life cycle of technology adoption, where early gains are driven by the foundational tech, but it is quickly followed by the hardware adoption and finally by value-added services and applications. And so if that's the case study, then what's the hypothesis around AI, what we're facing today? Like, we don't know how this ends, so we have to hypothesize on it in order to make informed decisions for the respective businesses that we lead. So my hypothesis on AI value creation is that we will likely have a layered AI ecosystem, similar to mobile internet, where value will shift over time from foundational technologies to enablers, and ultimately to applications. Although a twist, I believe the AI value creation journey will take place in maybe half the time it took for the mobile internet to play out. And the mobile internet on the last slide on the x-axis was time, and that was about 6 years. So figure maybe 3-ish years for AI to scale into the enterprises, meaning that we should expect scaled AI software in the enterprise, I would say by the end of next year to early 26. Of course, we have outliers, but I believe the norm will be scaled AI applications and solutions by this time next year, going into 26. So then it becomes like, how are these new AI IDP solutions, like Base64, how will they be scaled into the enterprise? How is it going to be different than legacy IDP solutions? What are the enterprises going to be able to do with AI-powered IDP that they simply were not able to do before? And so, quick orientation on this slide. Left side is basically yesterday's IDP, or what many of us are running today. On the right side represents the newer AI-native IDP companies. And the AI-powered IDP companies like Base64 represents a revolutionary leap in document automation and intelligence, which is why IDP companies that have been around for 10, 20, some 30 years have maybe 25 or so pre-built models, whereas AI-native companies have thousands of pre-trained AI models. Like, that is the power of the AI technology. Another key difference is in the workflow configuration that's needed in traditional IDP solutions, which, as we all know, with IDP solutions, it can be a Herculean effort to configure the workflow around the content-intensive workflow that you've brought the IDP in to handle. But with AI native IDP, there's a capability that actually my team is in Vegas at the ITC conference, the InsurTech Connect conference, unveiling, called content reasoning. And this is really used to essentially eliminate workflow configuration, drastically reduce, if not eliminate, workflow configuration. Why would you have a hard-coded piece of legacy workflow and decisioning engine do it when AI can perform the function? It's almost like using the abacus when you have the auto sum Excel formulas at your fingertips. You're just not going to go back to it. So content reasoning is a particularly sophisticated capability that, and I can only speak for Base64, but it uses our pre-trained AI models and our AI policy review to autonomously navigate and reason among complex documents that are located in different repositories. So it's reasoning two different documents, and we'll get into a use case in a little bit, but this is very, very powerful because right now you have workflow engines and people doing that. So this level of autonomous operation really eliminates that need for the tedious workflow configurations. And again, the people that previously are currently manually orchestrating that work. And many of you would probably, the light bulb's already going off. If it hasn't, it will, but many of you have outsourced to service providers or low-cost centers. This may actually allow you to reshore the work in-house to reduce that cost while increasing the quality. But essentially, content reasoning transforms static document processing into a dynamic AI agent that optimizes content-intensive workflows for your organization. And last slide on this, but AI-powered IDP vendors also enable you to build your own custom AI models in minutes with non-technical business users, or during the RPA era, they call them citizen developers, but non-technical users. This is really how we democratize the AI. And you can build these custom AI models around any new document, any new version of a document, again, in minutes. So unlike traditional methods that demand extensive sample collection, time-consuming annotation, now you can rapidly create models, minimal data and effort. We're talking 3 to 5 samples, not hundreds to thousands of samples. And by leveraging the natural language interface, which I believe is the new graphical user interface, the way we will interface with technologies moving forward is more around a natural language interface, so an NLI, not a GUI. These are very intuitive features, and you can start to define and configure AI models in, again, minutes rather than days, weeks. So this streamlined process not only reduces the costs, but also accelerates the time to value. And this is what's going to allow you to faster deploy your tailored AI agents for specific document processing. So this is the future, and we're excited. Working with Google AI, you're going to see Kyle and what Google's bringing, but using some of their AI, we're able to unveil our AI agents for processes like onboarding, claims, invoice automation, everything that the team's showcasing in Vegas this week. Okay, since we're in the business of building these solutions, we've assembled a diagnostic to help you evaluate AI-powered IDP solutions. I'm not going to obviously read this eye chart, but there's several key considerations in here to include the obvious extreme data extraction accuracy. You should absolutely demand this with AI native IDP vendors because it is absolutely possible. It should be table stakes now to get a first pass in the 90s. And if it's a pre-trained model, high 90s, if not perfection. You should also look for things like seamless secure integrations, APIs or no-code tools, solutions that emphasize data integrity by mapping extracted data back to its original source. And we're going to talk about trust and transparency shortly, but I think that's a big one that especially the CTOs and CEOs of organizations are demanding before they make big investments in AI is how can I trust the recommendations, the insights, the decisions that the AI is making. So again, this is a framework that we'll make available to everybody here. So this is the Base 64 document intelligence platform that I've been sort of teasing out for the last couple slides. What you will notice here is that we help enterprises really ingest, understand, and action complex data to fuel AI. We are 100% built on the latest AI transformer technology. We use range of large language models, LLMs, to provide the best possible outcomes for our customers. So we're not tied into just one LLM. And the secret sauce for Base 64, and I would assume many others, is the heavy stack of proprietary AI that we put on top of the foundational models. And because we are AI native, we handle the complex and messy data. Like that's what we want. We don't want the easy stuff. You've got other solutions you can use for the easy stuff. This means things like multi-page packages that involve multiple document types, tables split over multiple pages, tables within tables, unstructured text that has indentations, all things that you're able to handle with ease. And the latest AI innovation, again, we discussed this a little earlier, that we launched at InsurTech, or we are launching at InsurTech, it's still going on, are the AI agents with content reasoning. And I told you that I would like tease that out a little bit more to make it a little bit more concrete. So what do these agents really do? Think of any use case where you have a source of truth document or a policy This can be a customer or patient onboarding policy, maybe a claims policy. And for each of those use cases, you have new customers or patients that you need to onboard. You have insurance claims that you need to adjudicate, make a decision on. But in each one of those use cases, documentation is being submitted that needs to be reconciled or reasoned against the source of truth to determine if that customer or patient should be onboarded or if the claim should be approved or reimbursed. This was previously a person or a team reviewing and approving or denying the packages or claims. And they were likely, again, using a workflow automation platform with a decisioning engine and likely a few other tools. Those days are coming to an end. With AI-powered IDP, you can converge the technologies to reduce the total cost of ownership while improving the employee experience. And one thing to note, which is, I think, really critical for enterprises in highly regulated industries, like many of you on the call, insurance, banking, healthcare come to mind, is transparency. When our AI agents provide that insight, recommendation, or decision, again, it's looked at the incoming data, it's reasoned it against the source of truth, it provides insights, recommendations, or decisions, whatever you're comfortable with. Our AI agents actually point back to the exact passage in that source of truth document, know how the AI agent arrived at its decision. This is how you remove hallucinations from underlying large language models. But this doesn't marginalize existing security, existing data privacy measures, everything that we've all come to know. And these are many of the certifications that you've come to know that I think will be even more important as we move forward in the AI era, because along with transparency is going to be trust. So you should demand the enterprise certs from vendors that you're using, especially if those vendors are bringing AI into your business. So our commitment at Base 64 to our partners and customers is to provide access to our powerful AI models, but we never store your data. We only use your data for your request, and we use third parties like these certification and governing bodies to verify our privacy promise. And we only retain data if explicitly requested by the customer, which gives you full control over your information and data. Okay, a couple thumbs up. So yes, there's a few CTOs I see on this call, so I expected to see the thumbs up from the CTOs. And it seems that our customers appreciate the approach to AI trust and transparency as well, because when we do look at customer reviews, like on G2, that's a common theme that we see is around our AI and secure deployment models to include not just the SaaS solution, but also providing an on-prem solution and taking it even a step further for those that are super sensitive, which is an air-gapped solution. And happy to get into more of that in the Q&A. But those of you that perk up to air-gapped, you know that that's not a common offering. But that's how serious we take trust and transparency as we're deploying AI. Okay, you've heard enough from me. Let's move into a little audience polling before Kyle steps up to the plate and does better than his Dallas Cowboys. All right, Beth.
Brilliant. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, like Chris said, I'm going to put you guys to work now. So we'd love to know, what key outcomes would you prioritize when implementing AI-powered document intelligence in your organization? Would you prioritize reducing operational costs, improving data accuracy and reducing errors, scale enterprise AI investments to achieve meaningful impact and value, ensure compliance and improve audit readiness, or would you prioritize increasing scalability for high volume document handling? And if it's anything else, please feel free to put any other suggestions in the chat. We'd love to know what you guys think. And whilst I give you all a minute to answer that for us, I have seen some great audience questions coming in, Chris. So I think we should tackle the first one. And we've got a sort of double question here from Heidi. I believe this was in relation to the slide about AI ecosystems with the blue circle diagram you were showing, Chris. So Heidi would like to know, what would be the enabler for no workflow configuration, and what would be required to enable AI policy review to replace workflow configuration?
Yeah, so that's a great question. If you think about workflow configuration, you're essentially sitting down and mapping out A to Z how somebody like a claims adjuster would take in a policy, which is through some customer onboarding application. Separately, they've got a repository where they're keeping those claims, where they're keeping their source sort of documents. If it's a loan, then you'll have a loan origination system. And so the workflow configuration is really like, how do I connect those two to be able to provide a validation of one against the other? And so what you're able to do here is the architecture for the base 64 platform is essentially, we call them flows. And in one flow, you would simply put the source documents. In this case, you could put a policy. And in the next flow would be your ingest of the customer data. If it's a policy, then it's a claim that's coming in. And so in our platform, one flow simply talks to, via the AI agent, the other flow. And so this is the AI basically arbitraging out the configuration around a standard workflow automation platform. And so that's one example, but happy to provide others. But I think, Beth, you're ready to, and I love how you use the word tackle, like you're really into this football theme that we've got going on. But we're ready to tackle the next Q&A.
I appreciate that you noticed. So brilliant. We've had a good few responses from our first poll. So let's have a look what the audience said. So we had almost 21% prioritising reducing operational costs, with another 24% looking at improving data accuracy and reducing errors, almost 21% looking at scaling enterprise AI investments to achieve a meaningful impact and value, just under 7% looking to ensure compliance, and the majority actually opted for increasing scalability for high volume document handling. And then that's not it for you guys. We do have another poll question for you all, and we do have another Q&A question for you to answer, Chris, at the same time. So for you guys, we'd love to know, what AI-driven features would you like to see most in AI-powered document intelligence? Would you prefer to see advanced natural language understanding to interpret complex documents, content reasoning to reconcile source of truth, policy standards, etc., against incoming data such as claims and onboarding? Would you prefer to see AI-powered anomaly detection for identifying inconsistencies or fraud in document data? Predictive analytics to forecast trends or outcomes based on document information, or customizable AI models that can be fine-tuned for specific industry or business needs? And once again, guys, if there's anything else that you would like to contribute, please feel free to put it in the chat. And once again, whilst I give you all a minute to answer that, Chris, we have another question from Simajit, who would like to know if setting data standards would eliminate the use of extraction for processing purposes straight through from the beginning.
Yeah, so the answer to that is maybe not entirely, but I agree with the premise that having a good taxonomy up front can mitigate a lot of that noise. And so happy to take this one offline as well. So there'll be you can just contact Kyle or myself at the end of this, but I think this is a good conversation that requires actually showing you how we do it. It's called custom taxonomy. But it's not difficult. It's actually very, very simple. And it will eliminate a lot of the noise that you're alluding to in this question. So.
And we've actually had responses come in very quickly for this poll. So clearly our audience were quite eager to answer this one. So having a look at responses, we did have 16% that were looking at advanced natural language understanding, another almost 23% looking at content reasoning, just over 3% looking at AI-powered anomaly detection, 13% looking at predictive analytics, and the vast majority, over 45%, looking at customizable AI models. So thank you for your responses, guys, and all your lovely reactions. I've seen more come through as Chris was speaking, so thank you very much. But with that, I will hand over to Kyle.
Wonderful. Thank you, and great job moderating thus far, Beth. And Chris, appreciate again you bringing me into this. And I feel like it's not right to at least not bring up the Cowboys versus Lions as well. For some reason, I really like just pain and misery and rooting for teams that let me down. So I'm also a giant Timberwolves fan, in case anybody else is as well. But excited to be here today and talking a little bit more about the partnership between Base 64 and Google, and ultimately how we can be relevant to the folks here in attendance. So I have up here a few different things that we found from Gartner, and I found them to be really interesting, which is why I wanted to surface them here, in part from our conversations with Chris around some of the trends that I'm seeing in my role. So they briefly touched on it earlier. A core part of what I do at Google is I work with a lot of top tier investors in the world, namely like Greylock, Bain Capital Ventures, Coatue, Lux Capital, and a few others, as well as the companies that they invest in. So a lot of the top tier AI companies, some of which you've seen on previous slides, others that you may have heard of. I get to see a lot of these different companies that are building amazing models, as well as working with several Fortune 2000 enterprises, whether that's in my day-to-day and helping connect them or building out different customer advisory boards. And that's something that we could discuss after this as well for those that are interested to be part of these motions. One thing that we're starting to see is a lot of these enterprises that we work with are increasingly looking to try using AI. So that's where you see from Gartner, roughly 80% of enterprises are predicted to be using generative AI in some kind of capacity by 2026. But there's also a pretty steep drop off in the amount of projects that are actually going to be leveraged and fully brought into production. And it may seem slightly contradictory. And why is that? Part of what we're seeing is there's two different lenses to this. There's the enterprise side of the house and those that are actually adopting models. And then there's also the tangible business side for those that are creating generative models and agentic type organizations as well, where it's how they operate and how they become profitable, but also how they receive funding. So I'll touch briefly on both components here for this slide. On the enterprise side of the house, I've personally talked to quite a few Fortune 2000 enterprises over the last year or so that are really trying to dip their toes in the water. And I would classify a lot of these as science experiments of sorts, where they realize that they want to be able to reduce their operational expenditures. They're very much focused on how can we do better with the existing headcount that we have to improve our efficiency? How can we develop code faster? There's a variety of different use cases that they're really tightly exploring, but how that actually goes into production is sometimes a little bit of a question mark. And ultimately there's a few different concerns as well around how do we clearly define ROI and have that map from the beginning in terms of understanding if we put in X dollars, what is the Y output? And another component that I would list is the security and readiness. I hear from a lot of folks that when they're looking at certain providers, they really don't want their data to be used for other companies. They're very concerned about their own IP and having leakage of some sort, not necessarily even just being stored inside of model providers, but how do they think about having their data structured in the right kind of way and making sure that it's scrubbed appropriately so that as it's then surfaced, you don't accidentally have your model spitting out sensitive information to potential customers. So there's a lot that goes into the background to make sure that those types of things are structured appropriately. When it comes to the investor side of the house, I'm seeing a lot of focus now on ROI. When we're in the ZERP environment and capital is very free, there's a lot of startups raising money at over 100x valuations, and it was being tossed around freely for companies to be able to try out any kind of neat science experiment. That has shifted pretty dramatically in the last year to year and a half. And what I'm seeing right now is a very large focus on how do you create tangible value? And when we're looking at these startups, how do they create some kind of specific framework for these enterprises to then be able to test out their solutions and drive some kind of value from that? So being able to have some kind of tangible ROI, again, whether that's speed to development, it could be document processing time. There's a variety of other angles that you can ultimately look at with that. And also, how do you actually monetize these solutions? There's a variety of different pricing models and ways that these startups are going to market today. And product-led growth is a really great thing for many startups. But how do you ultimately then convert folks and cross that threshold where they realize value to then want to procure your solutions? So we're seeing a large amount of folks really trying to go through this and understand and contextualize how they can generate value from this. So there's a few different things that we're seeing as a result is companies are focused more on ROI, and they're thinking through, do we actually want to try out solutions externally? Do we want to build something in-house? Do we want to look at some kind of frameworks that maybe we build upon? I'm seeing all three of those things as valid options. So whether folks, like especially if you're at a very large financial institution where you might have hundreds of engineers and you could throw them at certain projects, it may make sense to build something in-house to some extent. But are you fully familiar with all the ins and outs of the nuances around models, hallucinations, et cetera, where you may be able to build out a base level of core intelligence and how you can leverage that, but it might make more sense to really outsource things where you don't have that core competency. So we're starting to see a little bit more and more with regards to that. And specifically, when it comes to where we're seeing these shifts, there's a few different things to go through. So ROI, we've talked about the general things on outcomes, but another thing we're seeing as well is vertical solutions. So as Chris talked about a lot of the specific workflows, there is a very large focus and shift now on how do we have specific point solutions and how do we solve for specific items. Instead of having really great broad horizontal foundational models, being able to train and iterate on top of those. And that's something I'll touch on in a moment with regards to Base 64 and Google and how we think about the ecosystem. But it's really something, again, thinking about what core competencies do you have internally that you can leverage and then build upon from there. And one thing we're seeing is that I saw there's a talk recently where I think it was like, if you're looking to be a hyperscaler to the lens of like a Google, Amazon, Microsoft, et cetera, it would require about $100 billion plus in capital to be invested to really be able to play in that sphere. You don't necessarily need to do that to be able to build out domain-specific workflows and like to do what Base 64 is doing, which is incredible on documentation and having these workflows, having your specific niche or areas of expertise that you can really do well in. And it's not necessarily going to have to take that amount of capital as we're solving for different things. A couple of which I'll touch on are models. So the traditional architectures a lot of people may be familiar with in Transformers was developed by Google, a team of researchers back in 2017. It's really great in that you can throw many things at these models and be able to spit out and make sense from it. There's many other companies right now that are receiving funding to rethink this type of architecture and be able to potentially make it much more cost effective, and which should help significantly drive down operational expenditure as you think about in your own business, how could we leverage these? And that's happening in real time. To Chris's point, even thinking through the mobile revolution from the advent of the iPhone in 2007 to now, in terms of how we're seeing a lot of these companies pop up in the innovative use cases, this is something that seems to be happening in a much faster cycle. The second of which is obviously NVIDIA has been one of the hottest topics in technology for a little while now. Which is completely fair given how integral they are towards the base compute power that's necessary in order to create all of these models. What we're now seeing is more and more innovation around this. We talk about Moore's Law historically around CPU power and how that dramatically changes over time. We're now starting to see specific purpose-built compute. And as part of that, whether it's TPUs within Google, we're seeing, if you've seen with Grok and LPUs, there's quite a bit of really unique things that are coming forth from that. When it comes to existing players, I would say also there's very many established enterprises that offer great solutions, but one of the really great things from what we're seeing the past couple of years is the ability for, again, startups like Base 64 and others to be able to create net new innovative use cases when they're born in the cloud, leveraging AI from the get-go, and being able to create these purpose-built workflows. And another thing is readiness and security. So I touched about it on the last slide. That is front and center for many folks, as we've already kind of had Chris allude to as well. But that is one of the biggest components I've seen as a hurdle initially towards having many of these Fortune 2000 enterprises adopt different solutions, whether it's built in-house or, again, leveraging external solutions. That's where we're starting to see a lot more focus in the investment community from VCs that I work with around really locking down identity access management, orchestration, and having a lot of granularity over control on those specific data sources that they then can access and plug into, as well as making sure that on the front end, whatever you're going to use in the enterprise context of whether, again, it's mortgage processing, et cetera, that you don't have any sensitive info being leaked. So is kind of what Chris had previously talked about with regards to making sure your information structured in an appropriate manner. This is where we're seeing a lot of investment focus, and I think we're going to have a lot of value from that shortly. I'm going to briefly go through these slides here. I have a little bit of context just in case folks here aren't familiar with how Google is a player in the ecosystem space around this. We think of AI and the general community at large as like a generally great partnership ecosystem and a very open ecosystem that we want to be part of. While we provide a lot of the base layers for things such as having general foundation models via Gemini and having open source models like Gemma, we also want to be able to build out more general ecosystem partnerships and provide access to a variety of companies. So you see a few different things listed here, including our model garden, where we host other models and companies that we partner with. So you can see here as a quick example, we have Gemini, Imagine, which is more of like a visual generative content, but we also have a few other names that you might be familiar with, like Claude with Anthropic, see some of Mistral's models, obviously with Meta as well. And we really want to make sure that there's an opportunity for choice in the ecosystem and that you can choose to build your own on top of a base platform if you'd so choose, but also being able to just use some models out of the box, whether it's ours or some of our partners. And as part of that, you can see here a few different types of use cases as well, whether it's vertical specific, whether it's image, like there's a variety of different multi-modality use cases that we think through, and I'm happy to share more afterwards if folks are interested. But again, I want to provide a high-level context that there are a variety of different partners that we work with. And in this, whether it's data, compute, there's a variety of different things that we have internally that you need to really effectively run models. And you'll see a lot of different logos here. And a large reason for that, right, is we want to make sure that you can choose to either partner directly with Google and build out a lot of the base resources that you'll need, but we don't necessarily have every single solution. So that's where we use tools like our model garden, but we also have Marketplace, which is if you have a relationship with Google today and you have some kind of commitment contract, you can then actually burn down on your commitment buying solutions through our marketplace, such as Base 64. So it's a really great way to leverage the relationship you have with Google and have one throat to choke of sorts, where it's an easier relationship sometimes from a procurement perspective, especially if you already have that type of relationship set up. So given that, that's where we really like to rely on partners, where it's these like specific use cases, document processing, et cetera, that we have coming into this conversation today. So would love to pass it over to Chris to talk through a little bit more about the specifics of this.
All right, Kyle, you really like saw the clock counting down there and you pushed through it. So our partnership with Google is really a cornerstone of our AI innovation strategy. So enabling Base 64 to use and leverage Google's cutting edge technologies, what's really accelerated our development and brought a lot of value to our customers. With Google support, we can now easily build and deploy AI foundation, and as Kyle had mentioned, the task specific models. And this is where we really integrate seamlessly into the Base 64 platform. And together, I would say that we're not just building AI solutions, but we're laying a foundation for bringing solutions to market at scale, again, through the Google Cloud Marketplace. And the illustration on the right is just, again, you could put Base 64, and a lot of you have IP within your own enterprises, and you could think of layering yours on top of, again, the Google Foundation models and the specific task models. But we found this to be a very easy sort of build and go to market. So we will end on this because I think we're trying to answer the Q&A. At least I was trying to answer some of the Q&A. We will answer them after the webinar, but I want to be respectful of everybody's time, and I think we're coming up on that time. But if you would like to experience firsthand the AI agents, the content reasoning, I see a lot of comments around the content reasoning and the custom AI model builder. Simply, snap the QR code and we'll set up some time and step you through it. but we really want to understand what your challenges are, not just showing the technology, but understanding your challenges and providing the product around and against the areas where we believe we can help you unlock and harness the power of your data. And as a thank you for participating today, as Beth said at the top of the call, you'll also receive the free trial of our entire platform, so you'll get all of the capabilities. The link that will be in the email that you'll receive shortly will provide that. And in that email, you will also receive the material from today and a few other resources to help you think through your AI investments and your deployment options. With that, Beth, I'll turn it back over to you to take us home.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, guys. I first of all wanted to say I would personally count the time crunch as a bit of a blessing, because it was such a content-rich session that sometimes the show must go on. So thank you so much for a brilliant session, guys. And as Chris mentioned, we will get through all the Q&A questions. I will connect with Chris and Carl after the webinar and get all your questions answered. I can see Chris was tackling them, to reuse the words, I was tackling them during the session. But that is all we unfortunately have time for. So first of all, thank you to everyone that took the time out of their day to join us. And once again, thank you, Kyle and Chris.
Thank you so much. And I would say as well, anybody can feel free to contact myself as well on LinkedIn. And if you are interested in being part of our customer advisory boards for finance, insurance, et cetera, and working with some of these investors, please feel free to reach out directly. Thank you again so much, Beth and Chris. Really enjoyed today's session.
Appreciate it, Kyle. Thank you.